Hi everybody, here we are again. Well, this video, what I wanted to do is just address something pretty foundational that all the other ones sort of make sense of because of this. And it's what Jesus is doing in our lives. What he came for, what he taught, what he demonstrated, and what he achieved. And what is that? Well, it all has to do with our identity, because it turns out that in the scriptures we're told that Jesus came so that we could become like him. So he has perfect communion with the Father. The power of the Creator God flowing through him, so much so that he breaks and changes the rules of the world around us. He heals people, he stops storms, he raises the dead, and finally he gives himself up on the cross so that we can experience the new life that comes out of the grave on the Easter Sunday as we celebrate. New life, new humanity. And that's the life that he wants us to live. And it's pretty amazing. And it sounds crazy and even absurd and bizarre. But hey, this is what the scriptures teach. There's a passage in Romans 8. I'll put the references up on the screen as we go along. And basically it's saying that God's plan from the beginning was so that we might conform to the image of his Son, to the likeness of his Son, and that he would be like that, so the firstborn of many brothers and sisters. And so we think, well, we want to become like Jesus in the way he thinks, in the way he speaks, in the way he acts and responds to the world around him, with the love of God and the power that brings flowing through him. And that he died and rose again so that we can become like that. A process, yeah, it's a process. Discipleship, following him, becoming like the teacher, the rabbi in the traditions of the environment, the culture that he grew up in. So we need to think a bit more about him. And what does the Bible have to say about him then? Well, it basically says the whole of the Old Testament, the whole of the scriptures, for thousands of years people writing stuff and it coming up and it heading towards this fulcrum point in history, the coming of the Messiah, the coming of God in the form of man in Jesus. And then it goes on to describe Jesus as being the perfect image of God, the exact representation of God, the fullness of God. In fact, one of his apostles said to him, Philip it was, and reference will come up there as one of them, it's John chapter 14. Philip said, "Oh, show us the Father and we'll be satisfied." And Jesus says, "Philip, have I been with you for all this time and you still don't get it? If you've seen me, you've seen the Father. Don't you believe that I'm in the Father and the Father is in me?" Was he basically saying, the scriptures say that if we want to know what God thinks like, how he responds to circumstances, and how he exerts his power in the world, we just have to look at Jesus. So how he treats people, how he responds to circumstances is just like, well, that's what God's like. That's his character. And his heartbeat is the heartbeat of God. He says he only came to do what he sees the Father doing. He only speaks the word so that the Father gives him to speak. He only does anything he does. He only does it because that's what the Father's doing and calling him to do. And in fact, so his words become special. He actually describes them as spirit and life. And he goes on to talk about the fact that if you abide in me and my words abide in you, then ask anything you want and you'll get it. And this is to my Father's glory, that you bear much fruit. And you just think, wow, these are mind-blowing statements. And yet that's what the Christian faith is about. All to answer these great questions of identity. Who am I? Where did I come from? Why am I here? And where am I headed? And from the moment we're born, we have to try and work out answers to those questions according to what's served up in life around us. And some answers to the questions might be compelling, other ones just seem really bad news. But they don't lead us to a life that is like free of anxiety, free of fear, free of all the stuff that presses down upon us, i.e., we only feel as good as life is going. That our circumstances seem all the time to set the agenda for how we feel. If they're good, we feel good. If they're bad, then we feel bad. But in Christ, we find peace. And that's what I'm going to talk about in the next video. What Jesus said, the consequences of abiding in him, in his word in us, becoming like him, saying yes to his perspective on the world and perspective on us. So I hope this has been helpful and uplifting. Please review the Bible verses as they come up. Go back and spend some time over them. But in the meantime, bye for now, and remember, rejoice always, pray continually, give thanks in all circumstances, for this is God's will for you in Christ Jesus, even now in these conditions. Okay.